few years ago, I was working in West Africa, and I had a day off in the Gambia, this small country almost completely surrounded by Senegal. And I was with my wife and a few of our friends trying to figure out what to do, and someone said, we should go to the crocodile farm. I was like, okay, let's go to the crocodile farm. Sounds good. So we load up in the Land Rover, and we go to the place, and we meet this guide. This guide kind of takes us on a tour and tells us everything we've ever wanted to know about crocodiles. And then finally we come to the swamp. And at first I don't see anything. I'm like, where are all the crocodiles? Then the guide stirs the water. And then 50 shapes kind of rise to the surface. And I'm like, oh, those crocodiles. Okay, great. And I noticed that the 50 shapes start swimming, paddling toward the bank. And there's this one croc, he's like Grandmaster Croc. He's like in front of all the others are holding back, and he kind of like crawls up on the bank by himself and just kind of hangs out. So the guide turns to all of us and says, who would like to pet the crocodile? Nobody says anything. He looks at me and he's like, you, sir, come on and pet the crocodile. He's very friendly. And I said, no, thank you. I think I'm good. And he said, no, really, it's okay. And I said, no, really, no, thank you. So we have this little bit of a standoff. And finally, somebody else comes forward and he says, I'll do it. Maybe more brave, maybe more foolish than me. And he starts walking toward the crocodile, but as he gets closer, he drops his sunglasses by mistake. And sunglasses fall on the ground, and all of a sudden, the crocodile, which had been completely docile, comes to life in this blaze of crocodile glory and starts paddling as fast as a crocodile can paddle, which is quite fast, actually, after the sunglasses. And before anybody can do anything, he grabs the sunglasses in his mouth, smashes them, and then retreats. So we're all kind of freaking out. And the guide has a really big stick. And so the guide starts hitting the crocodile in the head with the stick. No response. So the guide keeps whacking the crocodile as hard as he can. And we're watching this with a mixture of horror and fascination, right? Because we don't really want to see a crocodile being beaten to death in front of us. But at the same time, we're kind of impressed because the crocodile doesn't seem to be bothered by it. So finally, the crocodile opens his mouth, releases the sunglasses, which are completely smashed. Guide retrieves them, gives them back to the guy, and says, I'm so sorry, this never happens. He's like, normally, they're very tame. And I said, I'll have to take your word for that. So I thought about this story recently when I heard another story about the killer whale at SeaWorld that kind of decided it didn't want to play by the rules anymore, and it drowned its trainer. Now, this is a sad story, of course, but when I first read the headline, I thought it was something from The Onion. It's like killer whale lives up to its name, you know? And I thought, like, what do we expect from a killer whale? What do we expect from a crocodile? So the way it works at the crocodile farm is there's this deal. There's this bargain that's supposedly made with crocodiles. And the bargain is don't bother the tourists, like you behave around the tourists, and then later on after they leave, we're going to feed you. So the whole problem is that crocodiles don't play by our rules, right? And you know, what works one day with a crocodile or with a killer whale may not work the next day. So here we are talking about fear. And I think that fear is like a crocodile or a killer whale. It has the same untamable power. It has the same ability to really ruin our day or even our whole life. And because we don't know how to engage with fear, we don't know how to react or respond to it, we try to make a bargain with fear. We try to make this deal with fear. And the bargain that we try to make is, okay, I won't take any risks. I won't do anything really drastic. And in return, fear is going to let me have my little life. Now, sometimes it works. But just like the crocodile, sometimes fear decides it wants to break the bargain. It doesn't want to play by the rules anymore. And when it does that, it introduces us to a few of its friends: discontent, dissatisfaction, and regret. And the little life becomes a life of quiet desperation, where we find ourselves starting to ask questions, and we're like, is that it? Is that all there is? I'm not really changing the world in my job, but I've got benefits. My partner and I, we're not really happy in our relationship anymore, but it works. And those dreams that I had when I was a kid, I used to think of all this stuff, but really, that was just silly. I didn't really want to do that. And besides, now I have responsibilities, right? So we make these rationalizations because we know that if we're really going to acknowledge fear, if we're really going to engage with it and find a way to overcome it, then it's probably going to involve some kind of dramatic, uncomfortable personal change. Now, let's pause for an audience survey, because I don't want to assume anything. It's never good to assume. So raise your hand if you really like dramatic, uncomfortable personal change. There's one guy back there. You must be the next speaker. I look forward to hearing what you have to say. So I think most of us like the idea of change. We like somebody else changing. We like the promise of change, which is why so many of us were so excited about Obama in 2008. We're like, all this change needs to happen. This guy's going to do it for us. This is great. And he was very good for his part at going around and saying, this is not about me, this is about all of you. And I was sitting there and I was like, no, this is all you. This is great. You take care of this. Here's my $25. Please handle this. And so then when we realize that change is actually difficult, it might involve compromise, it might involve sacrifice. Worst of all, we actually might have to do something about it. We're like, that's not what I bargained for. I want my $25 back. So the thing about change, though, is you can't always just change one thing. And once you start going down the road of change, you don't always know where you're going to end up. So when I first went to Africa, I was volunteering for a medical charity, and I had no medical skills. And I had pretty much no marketable skills of any kind. I still don't. That's why I'm a blogger. And I had an honors degree in sociology, which qualified me for a job carrying boxes. Now, I kid you not, carrying boxes was really the greatest job in the world. It really was, because most of the time, you know, if you work for a charity, you don't always get to see like the direct relationship. You don't always get to see who's helped. But in my case, I could load up my Land Rover with a crate full of medical supplies and drive 6 hours into the interior of Sierra Leone and deliver those supplies to a clinic that had been destroyed during the Civil War. And basically whatever I brought them was all that they had. Or I could go to a well dedication ceremony and I could see the faces of happy children who are no longer dying from bad water. So I thought that was a pretty good return on investment. But as great as a job it was, as great a job of carrying boxes was, it didn't involve a great deal of executive decision making. For the most part, I just carried the box. And we were a group of about 400 people, kind of about the same size as this group here. And every week, we would meet in a room, you know, kind of like this. So it was our volunteers, partners, doctors, local people, and various leaders and executives would get up to make announcements and give progress reports and answer questions. And let me tell you, as good as I was at carrying boxes, I was even better at sitting in the very back of the room and judging those people who got up to speak. I was very good at correcting them in my head and thinking of not nice things to say about them later, and generally saying, if only I were in charge, then things would be different. I'm sure I'm probably the only one who's ever done something like that, but since this is fearlessness, I figured I would confess that to you today. So funny how life works. 6 months into what I thought was a 4-year commitment to carry boxes, someone was deluded or desperate enough to see some kind of potential in me, and I went from being probably the 375th member of the organization to being, you know, like the number 2 person of the organization. So all of a sudden, I was in charge. And in addition to visiting crocodile farms, I got to travel throughout the region and negotiate on behalf of the organization, meet with presidents, and all kinds of great stuff. But then I also now had to be the person who came up in front of the room to make announcements and give progress reports and answer questions. So I learned 2 lessons very quickly. You can probably guess what the first one is. First lesson, this is harder than it looks. I had no idea. And so I would look out at a sea of faces, and I would see my friends, my supporters, you know, smiling back at me, thank God for them. But then I would also see a number of people kind of sitting there like this, and I would look at them and I would think, I know exactly what you're thinking. And I wanted to go to them and say, you know, you don't understand, but like, you know, I'm here and you're there, but I used to be here, and now I'm there, and it's more difficult, really. It is. And the second lesson that I learned was, really, if you really want to acknowledge your fear and overcome it somehow, at some point you have to come up on the stage. You have to become a believer and not a cynic. At some point you have to be willing to step forward, whether it was a stage like this or a stage like this one here, or whatever the stage represents in your life. Now, there's some good news about this. Good news about fear is that it's not always the really big things that we're really afraid of. Sometimes it's the details of the things around the big things. So when Jolie and I went to Africa, we went to Sierra Leone in 2002. A lot of people were saying, "Oh, you're so brave." We kind of felt like it was a fraud because, when we actually got there, it was very meaningful and rewarding, and it wasn't scary at all. It totally made sense. But what was scary was packing up our dishes at home and figuring out how to forward the mail and saying goodbye, not just to friends and family, because we knew that would be difficult, but saying goodbye to routine and the security of knowing what your day is going to be like. And that was where the fear and the insecurity and the anxiety kind of came into play, which Seth Godin says, anxiety is just repeatedly experiencing failure in advance. And so I think that a lot of us live our lives and make a lot of decisions out of the fear of what other people think and out of the desire for approval. So I was talking with a friend, Jen, in Washington, D.C. about this, and she said, "Chris, I think you care too much." She said, "There's an incredible power in not giving a shit. There's an incredible power in just not caring." And I sat and listened to her, and I thought, I said, "Jen, I think you're right. I agree with you. I can see how a person could go far in life by just not caring. But for better or worse, I'm not that person. And I think there's a lot of us like that. I think there are a lot of us in this fearful category as opposed to the fearless category. And there are a lot of us who are really waiting for someone to come along and give us permission to live our lives. It's like when you're a kid, you can't go to school, and your mom or your dad writes you this note. And then the note is like, "Please excuse Jonathan from school today. He's got somewhere else to be." That permission slip then becomes very powerful to you. That permission slip becomes like your weapon. It's your validation. It's like, no one can bother me because I am excused. So we're waiting for some kind of permission slip like this to come along that's like, it's okay. Really. You can do that. You don't have to live your life the way other people expect you to. I've thought about creating a downloadable permission slip and putting it on my site. It's like, you can come and download this permission slip. And then I realized, as much fun as that would be, I can't do that because I don't have the authority to do it. It would be like, issuing a medical degree or something. I don't have the authority to make someone a doctor, so I can't give this kind of permission. This kind of permission is not something that's given, it's something that's taken. It's not bestowed upon by some kind of expert, it's something that's acted upon by an individual, right? So if you really want to do something great, if you really want to overcome fear, then you have to start by giving yourself permission. And then you start by looking around at the people that you met this morning, the people that you'll meet this afternoon, the people that you know. Because here we come to the all-important question about fear. What's really the goal? What's the point of overcoming fear? And there are two ways to look at this, okay? Here's the first way. Here's the conventional approach. Fear versus courage. Be fearless. Choose courage. Jump in the tank with the killer whale. Do extreme sports, okay? So I'm a little bit skeptical. I'm skeptical of the fearless. I think they're lying. I think some of them are hiding something. I think maybe they're not afraid to pet a crocodile or something, but there's probably something else there that they really are afraid of, and whatever that thing is, it's probably actually more important. So that's why I like to look at fear versus courage another way, like this. The small man builds cages for everyone he knows, while the sage, who has to duck his head when the moon is low, keeps dropping keys all night long for the beautiful, rowdy prisoners. So this is from the Persian poet Hafiz, and here you can see a clear choice between building cages and dropping keys, okay? Building cages is all about keeping people hedged in to that life of quiet desperation. It's all about restricting freedom, limiting choices, assigning busy work, pretty much saying like, okay, whatever you do, don't ask why. Never ask why. There's no shortage of people like that in this life. There's no shortage of cage building. There's also no value in it. That's why I think if courage really is the opposite of fear, then courage has to be about refusing to build cages and insisting on dropping keys. And courage is about helping someone to write that permission slip for themselves. Now, it's important to say that you can't open the cage for someone. They have to do it themselves. But you can help them see that there's a life available outside the cage. Okay, you can't write the permission slip for someone, but if there really is an incredible power in not caring, then I believe there's also an incredible power in equipping and encouraging and uplifting and inspiring someone to acknowledge that wall of fear that's in front of their own life, and helping them find a way to smash through it. One more story. So I've always liked this Zen proverb of a monk who's running through the forest. He's being chased by a tiger, and he's running as fast as he can. Tiger's right behind him. He knows if he slows down, he's going to be eaten. So he comes to the end of the forest, and there's a cliff, and he jumps off the cliff because that's the only option, and he grabs onto a ledge a few feet below the cliff. And he looks down, and he sees, a mile down, there's rocks, and he knows if he falls, that's it, right? And he looks up, and he sees the tiger. Tiger's just hanging out, not going anywhere. So he looks to the side, and he sees a strawberry bush. And he reaches over and picks a strawberry. And then he eats the strawberry. And then he thinks to himself, the only thing he can think, which is, this is the best strawberry I've ever eaten. I've waited my whole life for this moment right here. So grateful to be with you here today on Easter Sunday. Watch out for crocodiles. Enjoy some strawberries. Thank you.